Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome back. It's deja vu all over again. I saw all of you about 35 seconds ago, and we are back. It is Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that not only promises to bring you the very best guests in true crime, but it does so day in and day out, thanks to the hardworking people at STS, none the least of whom is Steve Cohen, not to be confused with Daryl Cohen. Steve Cohen is our booking producer, and he's doing great work today when we need him most, because it is an insane, crazy day, as they say. I'm going to bring this up, if I may. This is the now infamous ceiling fan, and we are looking at the Norfolk County Courthouse. Space Coast, I don't even know if this is the proper way for us to be doing this. I think we should be taking this full screen and us. I'm going to remove this so you can do it your way. But let me introduce the guests, and I'm all screwy here because we've been going all day long. But all you need to know about the man on the bottom left of your screen is his name is Richard Gabriel, and he is literally the preeminent jury consultant in the United States of America. This guy, Richard, what is the official name of your firm?
Decision Analysis.
Decision Analysis, because I don't have the bio in front of me. And Richard, thank you for being here. I know you were doing an other podcast as well. Please tell us what that is. A rising tide lifts all ships. We want to promote what you're doing.
Thank you, Joel. I'm actually doing a new podcast now called Anatomy of an Argument, in which we are discussing the nature of the work that I do, which has to do with the psychology of trials. In other words, what is the thing that makes juries decide? What is persuasive to them? What are the things that push their buttons, that rings a bell? What are the things that attorneys can do with their presentations, as well as with the witnesses? What is the psychology of jury selection? Who do you select? How do you then use strategy to eliminate jurors that are not favorable to you, retain jurors that are good? And then basically, how do you use jury research to basically enhance the presentation that you're going to be doing in trial to get the best results? So that's what the podcast is about. It's about communication also in our everyday lives. How do we be better communicators in our everyday lives?
And it's called Anatomy of an Argument. Is it strictly audio at this point? Can we watch it on YouTube? Where do we find it?
It is right now we're just working on the pilot, so it's not out yet, but we anticipate it's going to be out within the month. It will just be audio for now, but we may start doing some video at some point. We're going to be looking at sort of breaking down some of the famous trials, such as the Karen Reed or the Trump trial, or different aspects that are really featured throughout, to kind of say, okay, what does the public know? And then also help to educate the public a little bit about how the justice system actually works.
Richard, let me give you my advice, which is basically worthless, but I would definitely do video because in the next few months, Apple is switching over to video, as is Spotify and others. And you want to be ahead of the curve. So
sounds good.
Yeah, very good. And by the way, you can tell he's from LA because he's doing a pilot of the podcast where at Surviving the Survivor, we just put crap out and see what sticks. Anyway, it's a pleasure to have Richard Gabriel here. I don't have anyone's official bio, so I can tell you about Megan Sachs, that she's a doctor, professor at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Direct Appeal is one of her 2 podcasts, and she knows a hell of a lot about trials. Megan, how are you? Just remind me of the second podcast name, because my brain is mush today.
Mine too, but it's Women in Crime. Thanks, Joel. Sorry I'm late. Technology.
No problem at all. And last but certainly not least, backing into the corner of his office is a true mensch, Daryl Cohen. He is a criminal defense attorney. He's a court TV personality, and he's an actor. He's a famous actor. Daryl, great to have you back. He's shaking his head.
Just one comment, may I?
Yeah,
Richard,
please.
You've got some very sharp tongues behind you over your right shoulder.
sharp over your. Oh, is that what are we
Tongues.
talking?
Mother-in-law tongues.
Is that the plant? I don't know.
Right. Yes, I just thought I'd mention body language and tongues. That's all.
Oh, I love it. Daryl's quick and he's funny. Richard Gabriel.
Yes.
So this has been a crazy day. We've been on the air for the better part of the day, and around noon today, we found out that the jury told Judge Beverly Cannoni at the Norfolk County Courthouse that after a nine-week trial, they were essentially deadlocked. At which point, she said to them, "Go back in." Yeah, she said, "Go back to the deliberations room." And now the judge just came on, literally moments before you came on here, and said that the jurors need until 4:15. You have vast experience with juries and psychology of jurors. What do you think they've come to a decision now that they're giving a specific time that they need until 4:15 here?
That could be an indication. I mean, the interesting part about when jurors first come back and say we can't decide is the real question is really how divided are they? Is it only one juror or is it two jurors in the case? That can actually create greater leverage when a judge gives, I'm not sure she gave the actual Allen charge. There's a thing called an Allen
No,
charge.
she did not. She
didn't give an Allen charge, but she basically said, go back, works a little bit more. It was more of a gentle encouragement on her part. And that way the jurors can kind of go, okay, and they know this is a big high profile trial. They want to come to a verdict. So if they feel that there's some persuasive ability of other jurors to work on those one or two jurors, make some different arguments to them, they may have been able to say, hey, let's do this. It's obviously a Friday afternoon. Jurors like coming back right before a weekend. So I think at this point, the 4:15 is interesting because it may indicate they have a verdict. But the other big question really is if it gets to be there's 3 or 4 jurors that can't agree, that's a much more difficult to overcome that hung jury. And they may just go, hey, we've given it all we can today. Either we have to give up or we need a break for the weekend to think about it.
And we don't know the breakup in terms of how many in favor of guilty or not guilty. We have no clue. The judge doesn't know, from what I understand. The lawyers have no idea. All we know, for those who are tuning in, is that in exactly 5 minutes, the jury said that's how long they needed, until 4:15. So we could be getting a verdict at that time. Megan Sachs, good to see you. I know you've been covering this case closely. There's no surprise that there's this kind of confusion and craziness on a Friday afternoon because it isn't perfect character for this trial up to this point. I'm also getting word that there's some frustration boiling over outside the courthouse between the so-called free Karen readers and the anti-Karen readers. I hope everyone stays civil. But what do you make of this news today, earlier, that the jury was deadlocked, and now, as we're talking about, they're supposed to be coming back in 4 minutes time to let the judge know something? We don't know what.
I mean, wow, right? What a trial. What an announcement. I was not surprised one bit that they came back to say that we can't reach a unanimous verdict. I always thought that's going to be the problem here. How are you going to get 12 people to agree? There's so many questions here too. First they're deciding, is Karen Read culpable, or is this, some type of frame or cover up, police corruption? And then if you can get all those people to see some level of culpability, there's all these different levels. Did she do this on purpose? Was there some type of accident? What really happened here? And I think that's the question also. What actually happened? So there are multiple questions here that you have to get 12 people to see eye to eye on. So I kind of never thought it was going to happen. Now, if they come back in 3 minutes from now or whatever it is with a unanimous verdict, I think that would be even more surprising than them not coming back, to be honest. That was my thought. By the way, Daryl, I love being on the show with you. I got excited when I saw you were here.
I love being on the show with you too, and you're so doggone professional with that microphone set up and all. I'm waiting for you to be a recording artist.
I mean, we got a podcast studio here too, so it's always set up.
I know.
I'm getting paranoid because someone above, someone I don't know, just muted me. So we're getting updates here that there you go. The now infamous fan in the Norfolk County Courthouse. This is what they've been panning to. And again, in 2 minutes, we are supposed to hear from the judge and the jury. We're going to see what that's all about. Daryl Cohen, Megan said something interesting. She said she'd be even more surprised at this point if they have come to some sort of verdict. I believe that's what she just said. Do you agree with that, Daryl?
I don't disagree at all, but I do have this to say. If the jury is unable to reach a verdict with or without an Allen charge, just let them know that they're going to be deliberating over July 4th. Watch the verdict come in with fireworks. I could not have timed this any better, frankly.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Again, Richard Gabriel, if you don't know him, I have a list in the show summary of the trials that he's handled, and they're basically the biggest ones this country has ever seen. To you, Richard, just take us into the deliberation room. I mean, what is the pressure like, especially in a murder 2 charge here? What is the pressure like for these jurors to get it right, to want to get it right? What's the process that they go through? And by the way, the jury foreperson is a retired law enforcement officer here.
So that's interesting by itself. I mean, the process is always fascinating to me because there's usually 2 typical ways that they go about it. There's basically verdict-driven deliberations, and there's also evidence-driven deliberations. In a big case like this, typically the jury will go, let's go through the evidence. They sometimes don't jump right to the verdict form and say how many yeses, how many no's on this stuff, but they can use that as a reference point. Sometimes they'll get stuck on a particular issue and kind of go, okay, let's talk about intention here. Let's talk about the forensic evidence. Where are we stuck on that? Let's talk about motive. So that's where they start finding out here. But the other thing that I think there's a lot of pressure on this. You know, they know the world is watching here. They've been involved in this case for a very long period of time. They've seen a lot of witnesses. I'm not sure how many witnesses we were at this point. There's like more than 60 witnesses, I think, in this particular case. They've gotten really strong. I mean, Alan Jackson is an excellent defense attorney. I worked against him actually when he was a prosecutor in the Phil Spector case, and he's formidable. And you saw that in some of his cross-examinations in this case. And so jurors are sort of struggling now with 2 different versions of what could have happened here, going to the point that was just made. What actually did happen here? Does it meet the law? And then what they'll do is they'll say, okay, now that we've sort of teased through some of the fundamentals about what we think happened here, then they have to get to the verdict questions, and then they have to filter through, is this a murder 2? Or is this a lesser included? And so that's why they're kind of struggling with the difference between what the evidence is, what they think really happened here, and what is the law that's guiding them in making that final determination. So that's where a lot of the pressure comes in, as well as just the interpersonal dynamics. Sometimes you might have a law enforcement officer determines a little bit about how strong is his personality, how dominant is he in the deliberations versus how does he get along with the other jurors. Prosecutors typically want a jury that really get along, work together evenly. But sometimes there are these sort of personality clashes that can result in a hung jury. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, Richard, I know you're going to have to bounce. Did you say around 4:45 Eastern time today? Is that what you said?
Yeah, something around that.
So Steve Cohen, if you're listening, I think we should bring someone on around 4:45 and COE. Maybe you can let Steve know that, but not until Richard has to go. And since we have Richard for a limited time and he is such an expert on juries and how they work, let me ask him one more question. So back to this belief that the foreperson, I don't think it's a belief. I think it is a fact that the jury foreperson in this case is former law enforcement. And the defense in this case is literally accusing law enforcement officers of framing Karen Reed. How do you see that playing out? Usually it's a brotherhood. This is a male law enforcement, retired law enforcement officer. Do you see him leaning in favor of kind of protecting his fellow brethren, or going the other way? Here's movement. Let's hold off on that answer and listen in together. It's a big moment right here, ladies and gentlemen. A very dramatic moment. That is John O'Keefe's parents. They believe firmly that Karen Reed is guilty in all this. You're looking at Peggy O'Keefe and John O'Keefe's father.
All right. So, jurors, we all know how hard you've been working. It's been a long day. We're going to let you go. We'll see you Monday morning at 9 o'clock. To the extent that you can, please just not think about this case this weekend. Clear your heads. We'll start fresh on Monday. So please follow those instructions. Do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into the case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about the case, please disregard it. We'll see you later. Thank you.
All right, to the court, please. Jurors, follow me.
Thank you. Be seated. Close still in session.
All right. We'll see you Monday morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
I was going to say, I'm sorry. Now you can hear me. I was going to say the only thing that could have been more intense than that is if Carm, my mother, FaceTimed me in the middle of it, which thankfully she did not do. But Richard Gabriel, I've got to come to you first on this. Just retracking what happened today around 12 o'clock. The jury said they had a question, which wasn't a question. It was basically a statement. And they said, Judge Canoni, we are unable to come to an agreement. We are deadlocked. She said, go back and continue to work. At about 3:45, which was a half hour or so ago, they gave an indication that they needed until 4:15. A lot of people assumed, hey, we're getting a verdict at 4:15, especially on a Friday. And as you just witnessed history firsthand, the jurors came back and told the judge they are still hopelessly deadlocked, to which she said, you will come back Monday morning and continue to deliberate. This is about as high drama gets. Richard, what do you think is going on reading between the tea leaves here?
So it's dependent upon two elements here. One has to do with what is the split? How many people are in this deadlock? If it's one person, it's one thing. If it's 3 or 4 people, or if it's right down the middle, that's another thing. Let's remember, defense always wants at least a hung jury in this case. So it's going to be a victory no matter what. A retrial, though, if it's only hung and one juror's thing, the retrial becomes much easier for the prosecution. If it's dead split down the middle, prosecutor really has to take a look at, do I need to drop a charge, especially the murder 2 charge, and lighten this thing up and streamline my case here. That's a big decision point. The other factor that I think really will determine whether this stays hung or not is the personalities of who are on the minority position here. And if those people are going to cross their arms and go, nope, I ain't doing it, this is just how I feel about it, that is going to be tough. A weekend's not going to make a difference there. If the person has sort of they're just not sure yet, they just can't do it, they can't go with the thing there, and they need to sit on it over the weekend, that can create movement sometimes if a juror is not the strongest of personalities and they're just a little bit uncertain, they're not quite there yet. That can create movement. Also, the thing that's really challenging in this case is they're not supposed to talk about this case with anybody. They're not supposed to look anything up. But sometimes those outside influences over the weekend can start working on that jury, and they need to start thinking about, okay, how is my verdict one way or the other going to affect the coworkers, the family who know obviously I'm a juror on this case? So I guess I'm leaning more toward, it sounds, if they say they're hopelessly deadlocked, that sounds pretty solid. And it sounds like there's not much movement over the weekend. But that being said, It depends on those two factors, strength of personality and numbers.
Well, there you go, from one of the best jury consultants in the country. Denisha here says, thank you to Julie Frew, who, by the way, is our mod, one of the hardest working people I know. No glamour and modding, but it's very important, especially with this trial where tempers are running high, and everyone, Space Coast, mixing it up with some people. People's tempers are running high and or short. So taking too long to deliberate. Daryl Cohen, I'm not going to say how many years you've been in the business, but it's been a few. More than Megan Sachs and less than more than Megan Sachs and less than George Washington.
Not much.
No. What do you think's going on here, Daryl?
Well,
What's your best guess?
You know, I go back to the 2016 presidential election, and people who love Trump had this saying, lock her up, lock her up. Well, I think the judge has made a mistake. I think the judge should lock them up, make them deliberate over the weekend. And if they're still deadlocked, let them know that July 4th is just another hour, just another day, just another date. I think it depends. And I agree with Richard and I agree with Megan, even though she hadn't said anything yet, because I think she's cool. And so I think that it's the body language. If we could have seen that jury to see what type of body language and facial expressions are on the various jurors, we might have had some sort of an idea of whether we're talking one person that wants to acquit or 11 people that want to acquit, or one person that wants to convict or 11 people. And I think that makes a big difference. But I also believe that going out and not paying any attention to any social media, not watching about this case, is just as likely as me becoming 2 years of age again. There is no way for them to avoid seeing it. And most of those jurors will close his or her eye on one side and have the other eye open. There's no way to avoid the publicity. Just can't. And I also agree, by the way, that if it happens that there is a deadlocked jury, the murder needs to go away. I've always believed that that murder was overcharging.
I agree with you, and I've heard that from many other attorneys and prosecutors, and it seems like that was maybe a bridge too far. But Richard pointed something out that's important, and the reason, and I was told this by other attorneys, and you could probably explain this better, Daryl. They had to agree on the most severe charge before moving to the other charges, and that's why there was no verdict on the lesser charges. Is that correct, Daryl?
Normally, that would be the case.
So we have Richard for a short period of time. I'm just going to read a tweet here. I'm monitoring this cesspool known as X, and someone named Allie says, Richard, I'm sorry, but a hung jury is not a benefit for Karen Reed. The Commonwealth learns how to retry it the right way after a hung jury, and most hung juries are ultimately found guilty on their second trial. True statement or false statement, Richard?
No, that's actually very true. I mean, the truth is that prosecutors, they have to take a serious look at it. Depends what the hang is. If it's 11 for acquittal, they have to take a serious look at their case. That's much tougher to there. If it's only a few people that are for acquittal, absolutely, the prosecutors will learn from it. They will figure out. Typically, first trials, always in big cases like this, are a little bit overblown. There's a little bit more overcharging. There's a little bit more evidence and stuff. And because prosecutors are still figuring out what needs to happen. After the case, they take a look at it. They find out, sometimes they interview jurors, and they find out what worked and what didn't work in the case. And they can then streamline the case. And that absolutely ends up with sometimes more strength in terms of conviction. But it really does have to do with where it is. The truth is, defense can actually learn from a retrial too and strengthen their position as well. So I tend to agree that it usually favors the prosecutors, but it depends what the split is.
Wow.
Can I jump in just for a quick second?
Please, Daryl, please.
These prosecutors have lost the KISS method. Keep it short, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. They confused it, stupid, and that was being stupid.
And I'm going to come back to you with a defense question in a moment. I'm monitoring Twitter, and this just popped up. It happens to be from our friend Turtle Boy here, Aiden. Megan, he says the jury is being sent home for the weekend. This is from 4 minutes ago. Juror number 7, cheeks were red. She looks like she has been crying. It's a question for Richard, but what do you make of that? What do you make of that?
Well, there's lots of interpretations of body language. I remember during Trump's New York trial, everybody was like, oh, this one juror kept coming over, seemed to make a lot of eye contact with Trump's team and stuff like that. And it's obviously misconstrued. People are terrible at reading body language for the most part. We're not sure exactly what that means. It can just be, oftentimes when there's a hung jury, it's frustrating. There's a lot of jurors, they want to get to a verdict here. And if there's real deliberations, a lot of times the jurors are like, this person's being unreasonable and that person is kind of crazy. I can't believe they actually believe that. So it could lead to tears. It could lead to frustration. It could just be they're tired and it's Friday afternoon.
Yeah. People were worried just ahead of this, Megan, that they're exhausted and they're just going to make a decision. But that didn't happen, thankfully, because you should never make a decision, even though I personally do it all the time. But you should never make a decision about someone's fate hanging in the balance based on you being tired and wanting to go home. Correct, Megan?
Absolutely. I mean, there's jury fatigue here too. One of the comments that I saw a lot on Instagram that surprised me, or maybe doesn't surprise me, but I think I know better, is why isn't the verdict coming in quicker? It should be a quicker verdict. I'm like, should it be? I mean, we had a long trial here. We've got a murder charge. We've got a ton of evidence. 70 witnesses by the prosecution, as I think I understand it. And I think it should be a long deliberation. And also, I don't happen to agree that, anything more than 6 or 8 hours is a long deliberation. So I think our version of short, when you have juries who come in 2 hours, I really question what kind of job they've done and if they've done their job, to be honest. So, no, the jury's taking their time, but an appropriate amount of time. I don't think this seems like a protracted verdict by any means, given the length of the trial. This is a murder trial. So I'm not surprised. I'm glad that they're doing their job as well they should be. So well done.
Daryl, I kid, but you are the elder statesman of this panel, I believe. And for the very first time today, and I'm looking at video of this right now, Karen Reed is guilty. Protesters or demonstrators are at the courthouse now. So it's been these free Karen Readers in the pink. But for the very first time today, people who believe Karen Reed is guilty, they're holding signs, and they seem to be a little bit on edge and a little bit at odds. As the elder statesman of STS, what would you caution these people in such a heated moment? Tension, nerves are raw and tensions are high right now as we're waiting. Are you worried that there could be something, that happens outside this courthouse because it's such a heated trial?
Joel, with what has taken place in our country the last 4 or 5 years, every time there's a demonstration and a counter demonstration, I'm always very concerned that someone, whoever he or she or they may be, is going to go off the rails. And it could be, we don't know if they're carrying guns. We don't know if they're just have a fist. We don't know if they're martial arts. Yes, I'm very concerned. And what my advice to them is, no matter what the verdict, hung jury, not guilty or guilty, it's not going to change your life and it's not going to change the United States of America. So have your own opinions, voice your opinions, but do it in the right way. Stay cool. Be cool.
So
You heard it from Daryl. Go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry.
yeah, I wanted to add in on this because, I do a lot of commentary on these big trials. And the problem I see also is that we follow them. They're fascinating to us. We somehow feel we identify that. We somehow feel we're jurors. We get attached to a position, either guilt or not guilt or something like that. And so we somehow feel that if the verdict comes in and it's not what we feel, that somehow the justice system hasn't worked. And that's why I want to add to what Daryl said. You can disagree with the verdict, absolutely. But the truth is, respect the process here. It is an extraordinary process, a jury trial. There's not that many times in our civic lives where we get together with a group of people we have absolutely no idea about, a diverse group of strangers, and make an incredibly important decision about somebody's life. To me, there's no country on earth that does it this way. It's a pretty extraordinary symbol of our democracy. And so I think we need to be respectful of the process, even if sometimes we don't agree with the outcomes.
Richard, I'm going to have you piggyback and answer this question from another Richard Lockhart here. What if the foreperson is on the minority? This is, again, a law enforcement, retired law enforcement. The whole case hinges on an allegation or defense theory that the other law enforcement officials are responsible for the death of John O'Keefe. What about this? What if potentially he is the lone holdout? We don't know, obviously, but what about the minority and them being the foreperson?
So that's a really interesting question, because what tends to happen, four people tend to moderate juries in different ways. And sometimes they can be in the minority on a case, because sometimes if they come out too strongly, so there's sometimes foreperson is very dominant and they're very controlling, and they want to sort of push everybody to kind of follow their lead in terms of what they feel in the case. That can create a polarization in the panel and can create divisions by itself and stuff. The other thing that can happen, though, is sometimes a foreperson is much more moderate and actually does a much more better job of saying, I'm not going to voice my opinion because I don't want to influence anybody, and I just want to hear from everybody. And they are more of a facilitator of the deliberations. They can still disagree with the majority. So oftentimes it doesn't happen where the foreperson is the lone minority holdout. It can happen, but I'd say that's a much rarer circumstance.
Megan, to you from Toy White, there's an interesting question, I think, within this question, which is what I'm getting at. But Toy White asks, what if the juror that is holding out refuses to come back on Monday? I would grab my lawyer and refuse to come back because Alan Jackson was staring at each and every one of those juries, crazy, whatever. So the bigger question here, I think, is this has been a very contentious trial. And these jurors need to be, I think, worried for their own safety to some degree. I don't want to be hyperbolic and I don't want to be some kind of alarmist, but what if they're fearful, Megan? What if they're scared of sticking up for whichever decision they believe is right? What about that?
Oh, that wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, this is a very, very sensational trial, and there's so much media attention and scrutiny. I'm sure that they are experiencing not just fatigue, but anxiety, fear, all of these things. And look, they have to go back to their lives after this and realize that there's going to be people who disagree with them. And I can all but guarantee there's going to be criticism of them. There might even be alienation from family, friends, colleagues. I think they're going to experience, unfortunately, some negative consequences. Of course, there will be positive ones, people who will appreciate that they, took such a role in the civic process and that they really took their job seriously. But I think that being fearful, not just fearful of, let's say, their physical safety, which is certainly an aspect, but fearful of all the kind of intangible things that they're about to maybe lose or experience wouldn't surprise me one bit, because I think they are up against that, unfortunately. And that is unfortunate because they're doing a job that, they were selected to do, and they're doing the right thing here. But no surprise if they're afraid or experiencing, I would think, anxiety on certain levels, especially now in an era where we've seen many of these trials play out in the last, 20 years or so since trials have been televised. So these jurors have seen massive trials play out, and they've seen what happens afterwards. They've seen the polarization, they've seen protests, they've seen how people have been shamed, jurors publicized. So yeah, of course they're going to be experiencing these things and these feelings. They have every right to it.
Mm. Richard W says free Karen Reed, the movement there, I guess you would call it, has seen corruption and conspiracy at every turn. They won't stop with a guilty verdict, but will with a not guilty. Probably a good point here. Daryl Cohen, to you, we don't know. We're going into uncharted territory on Monday with this jury. It sounds like they're having a real hard time coming to a decision. There is something called the Allen charge, where a judge basically forces his or her hand a little bit. When do you expect we will see that Allen charge, if at all, and how will the judge deliver that?
My best guess is that the judge will let the jury go back and start deliberating on Monday, assuming they all show up and we don't have to go find one or more of them. And if they're still unable to reach a verdict by mid to late afternoon, I think we can expect the Allen charge to take place very quickly. And I also keep saying, I don't understand why this judge is not sequestering that jury and keeping them together and forcing them to have that feeling of, oh my gosh, I've got to reach a verdict, whatever the verdict may be.
By the way, I asked that. They said they simply don't put. I asked Joe Krowski, who's a criminal defense attorney out of Brockton, says they simply will not put jurors up at a hotel. I guess that's just the way it goes in Boston. Lee K here to Richard, who's got a few minutes left with us. I haven't heard. So Richard, the last two defense witnesses were actually hired by the FBI. They were reconstruction experts who said the physics and the science doesn't lie and he was not hit by a car. The Commonwealth's own medical examiner said she could not, determine that it was a car injury. So the question from Lee here is, I haven't heard why not guilty peeps don't believe the medical and scientific evidence. I think it should be the other way around, right?
Yeah. I think what this person actually, I think this Lee sounds like they believe the prosecution's medical experts about that there was contact with the car there. The thing that you just brought up, which I think is also causing some of the hung jury there, not only can't the medical examiner say that, but also there are these sort of independent third party things that is very unusual in a criminal case. Typically, you have one side or the other, but there are these what objectively can be objective third party forensic experts that have come in and said there's not necessarily a connection that can be made here, and so I think that can be weighing on the jurors there. I did want to also come back to the question that you asked me about the law enforcement officer as the foreperson here, because I think that's a really important point, Joel. It's a huge risk actually for both sides to leave law enforcement on there. And this is what we do when we do jury selection. We want to say, how much risk can you deliver? I would say it's much riskier for a prosecutor to leave a law enforcement officer on there, because somebody has that kind of experience and has that kind of knowledge is going to drive juror delivery. They can easily say they're not supposed to, but they can easily say, when I was doing an investigation, here's what I would look at, or here's the kind of evidence that I'd be going through. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to bring their own experience. They may or may not be doing it, but they have a tremendous influence there. I think the defense probably said, look, this guy, if he's been in law enforcement, he knows how law enforcement tries to cover itself. And he knows how they can gather around and stand behind the blue line here. And so I think they're counting on him to kind of say, look, I can't convict her because I know what happens when the force says one of our own gets killed. We got to bring justice somehow to this. So I think it's a big, interesting point that both sides decided to leave him on the panel.
And by the way, you're getting insight from one of the best jury consultants in the country. One last question for Richard before he has to run, and then we're going to dig deep with Daryl and Megan. But realistically, they get the instructions, and we just talked about them not being sequestered, but they always get the instructions. These are human beings in a world where everyone's got a cell phone, social media, rules the day. Realistically, what can you expect jurors to hear and see this weekend? I mean, they're not going to keep themselves sealed in a hermetically sealed room. They're going to be out and about. They're going to be at Home Depot like me looking for screws for a coffee table that came without them. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in the real world? Are they going to get bits and pieces of this in their ear that they probably shouldn't be?
Maybe. I mean, the truth is, it's a really highly publicized case. I'm not sure they're going to be exposed to anything from an evidence standpoint that's going to move them one way or the other. They've heard everything, they've seen everything. There's not a bunch of exculpatory evidence or other types of evidence that hasn't been included in the trial. If there has, they probably were exposed to that ahead of time. It's tough. The truth is that jurors, I think, do their best. There are jurors that sit there and go, I'm totally on a blackout on my media stuff. There are jurors who do look at stuff. The real question really is, it's their internal process that I think is really going to happen over that weekend. It's really just them going, how strongly do I feel about this? What is the social pressure here? How strongly do I feel? How much am I able to stand up to the majority? What's this split? Do I have allies on my side, or am I the lone wolf here? That's really what's going to be that sort of evaluative, contemplative process, I think, for a juror over the weekend. And then I think, as Megan said, what is my family going to say? What are my coworkers going to say about this? And how is that going to affect me? So all this is kind of works on them. It's a very difficult process for these jurors. That's why I say, whatever the verdict is, even if it's a hung jury, respect the process and respect the jurors are really doing their job.
Richard, one very quick final question. What is the longest deliberation that you can recall in an American trial, in a modern day American trial?
I'm trying to come up with it. There have been jurors that have deliberated for months on this.
I bring it up because Little Lamb says on Laura, just now, someone mentioned that the longest deliberations in the UK was 4 months.
Yeah.
If I have to do this for 4 months, I'm going to be institutionalized, but go ahead.
It's really difficult. But there have been months-long deliberations in cases. It's extremely rare, but you can see jurors that go. But typically in those types of cases, you don't get jurors that keep coming back and saying we're hung, we can't be doing. So I don't expect this is going to go that much longer. Either someone's going to fold, or a few people are going to fold, or they're just going to say, that's it. We can't do it.
One thing you can say for sure, the drama is high. Richard Gabriel is one of the best jury consultants in the country. Thank you for spending part of your afternoon with us, Richard. By the way, Richard, I'm going to be in LA signing books at the Grove on August 15th, and I would love to have you as a guest of honor of ours. I will send you an email about that.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Yeah. Great to see you.
All right. Good luck with the podcast.
All right. Soon. Thanks a lot, Joel.
Now I feel like the principal is left and we can have fun. Rosemary Romero, Megan Sachs here. I love Richard. He's a good guy. He's just.
Yeah, I didn't want him to leave. I was like, I have so many questions.
Yeah,
where's he going?
He's so smart with this. I mean, he's literally been doing this since I think 1982. He kind of revolutionized the whole science of jury consultancy. But Megan, from Rosemary Romero, our friend in Toronto, do you think the jury's hung up on the dog bites, tail light scratches? I mean, that's obviously a big, there are a few things that stand out. That's obviously one of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Daryl about whether or not the defense went too heavy on the cover up. I'm going to get those thoughts in a moment. There's also the fact that we heard Karen Reed's voice in closings that I think was powerful. But what about Rosemary's question here to you, Megan?
Well, I think they asked to see a report as well about the evidence collection as it pertained to the taillight. So I think they're definitely really visiting that evidence. I have to imagine the injuries, the possible dog bite. I have to think that is playing a large role. The Google searches, I think there's a lot of evidence here that they're probably weighing all of it, especially when you have strong expert testimony on both sides. How confusing, right? You don't always I mean, in high profile cases, you can have experts, and oftentimes you'll have good experts, but not in every trial do you have top notch experts debating on both sides. Sometimes you have one expert that's good, one that's meh. It's also a matter of not just the experts, let's say their qualifications, but who the jurors like. I've seen, juries where I thought there was an expert who was clearly more qualified, but the jurors liked the other expert better because the expert put it in layman's position terms, and so there's that factor. It's not just the evidence; it's how was it presented? Who do they like more? There's so many factors going on here, and there's so much evidence that I've run through. So I have to imagine every juror or most jurors are running through this significant evidence.
Interesting. How the psychology plays into this. And
Yes.
look, when you look at Adam Lally, I don't want to say objectively, but when you look at Adam Lally next to Alan Jackson, I think Alan Jackson is a more sort of intimidating, polished figure. You
Yes.
don't know what's going on with the jurors as it relates to that. From Helen Fong, Daryl Cohen, I've got questions for you, but from her, if it is a hung jury, is it mandatory to have another trial? I live in Massachusetts. I paid enough taxes for this trial. Daryl, it is not mandatory, but what are the circumstances where they would retry this, Daryl, if it is a hung jury?
Well, it depends. If it's in Framingham, we do one thing a little bit different because we could frame the trial. No, seriously, it becomes up to the district attorney's office, the prosecutor, whoever makes that decision. Should we retry it? And a good bit of that decision will likely be if they have some insight as to whether or not that jury was leaning toward an acquittal or leaning toward a conviction. If they believe it was 9-3, one way or the other, that would make their decision, in my view. If they believe that a jury is going to likely acquit, they're not going to waste the time and the person power to do it. If, on the other hand, they think they're very close to a conviction, different story. Quite frankly, I will not at all be surprised if this jury does reach a verdict and it's some sort of a compromise verdict, because that way nobody's unhappy, but nobody's happy.
By the way, here is very quickly, I should have built a graphic. I'm going to just fly through this. The 12 jurors that are deliberating, man in his 40s, woman in 60s, young woman around 30, woman with brown hair, 60s, bald guy with glasses, 50s, looks smart, Asian guy with glasses in 50s, looks smart, white woman around 30, glasses, man in his late 30s, blonde woman in 40s. I don't know what number 10 is. Big, friendly looking guy. Number 10 is a woman. 11 is a big, friendly looking guy. And number 12, Asian American guy with a bow tie. So I don't know what that tells you. Look at this. Sky Lazaro is back.
I am.
Sky is criminal defense attorney out of Utah. Sky, let's get you right in here right away. So you were here earlier when the jury came back and said, look, we need more time. Then at 3:45 Eastern, they told the judge, give us till 4:15. So everyone assumed that they were coming to some sort of conclusion at 4:15. Lo and behold, the judge says, we'll see you on Monday. What do you make of that, Sky?
Is this the jury expert I was wanting to hear?
No,
anyway?
that's Daryl. That's Daryl. That's another
What I
expert.
say.
The sky for me, the limit is the sky.
Yeah, you missed Richard Gabriel. You came in Richard's place.
Okay. My guess is if the jury asked, hey, give us a little bit more time, give us till 4:15, that kind of signals to me that they may be getting close, or at least they thought they were getting close to maybe coming to some unanimous conclusion one way or the other. So I guess that's maybe promising. It's hard to say, but that's kind of what I would be my takeaway from that. If they just came back and said, we've made no headway, judge, this is where everybody's at. There's nothing we can do. Nobody seems to want to budge. I think it would have been different, but saying, hey, give us another hour or whatever that was to keep talking about it tends to signal to me that they may think that they're getting close to coming to some sort of agreement on this.
And Sky, to you, one of the issues that's come up as I'm sinking deeper into my chair late on a Friday, but one of the issues obviously here is that it's very tense. Um, they're all along, there have been these free Karen Reed protesters wearing pink, but in the last week, they've been there in the couple of hundreds. And now some Karen Reed is guilty demonstrators showed up. Things are tense. And have you seen a situation where jurors get scared? They get scared to pick a side because of the way the public might or may react.
I have not had any personal experience on my cases, except that as it relates to like protesters or things like that, we have some issues out here. I do a lot of sex cases where we have these bikers against child abuse who will show up and they come in, their cuts, they're big, intimidating guys, and they will either sit in the hallway if I can get them booted from the courtroom and watch people come in and out. And I've had jurors say that they found that intimidating. I just think it's human nature. It's going to be hard for these jurors, not as hard as I think they're trying to do the right thing and stay focused on making the right decision, to not be at least subconsciously, if not consciously, affected by this. I think that's in the back of everybody's mind. Here are these poor people. I don't know what you guys pay jurors out there, but they get paid $18 a day or something here. It's insane. They've taken all this time out of their lives and off work to do this civic duty, not really by choice, but kind of. So I think it's really unfortunate when you have jurors who are feeling intimidated or being intimidated, but I can see where they may be concerned about it one way or the other, and not, if this jury is hung, these people may never want anybody to say who was on what side of things.
Right.
Yeah. I could see that. Nikki Cuds, friend of the show, Jersey girl, gifting 5 surviving survivor memberships. The chocolate screw fund. I'm missing screws for a coffee table. I think, did you mean coffee or chocolate, Black Widow? Anyway, Black Widow comes to us from the Republic of Ireland. I love her dearly. She's a character. Usually she's speaking Irish, and I don't understand what the hell she's saying to me. Analytical Blarney AB, much longer than 11 months. She's been a member. Daryl Cohen, this is an interesting question. I think the answer is no, but Angie wants to know, the jurors are able to text each other, hey, do you want to go to lunch? But over this weekend, now that they're deliberating, can they be in communication with each other outside of court? I think not. Sky is shaking her head no. Daryl, what is the official answer, Daryl?
From the old guy, from the senior member of this panel, I would say the word is no, and it's not spelled K-N-O-W. It's spelled in large font, N-O. Any communication that any juror would have with another juror would be frowned upon, because it's not what you do, it's what you appear to do. And if any member of the public happened to see it, and oh, by the way, Your Honor, by text, by email, by phone, it's a bad look, and it's likely a mistrial, and certainly appealable if there's a verdict of guilty.
Yeah. From Anja here to Megan. Megan, of course, is a doctor of criminal justice. Is it criminology or criminal justice? I don't know. Are they one and the same, Megan?
They're similar. My doctorate is in criminal justice, but I'm a professor of criminology. So,
so I hit both.
I can handle both. Don't worry.
So Angie here, do you think if the judge keeps sending them back to deliberate, that they may compromise and say not the murder 2 charge, I think, but guilty on the involuntary manslaughter, just to get out of there? We hope things aren't done on a whim, but realistically, is this what could happen? Because they can't deliberate on the lesser charges, from what I understand, till they come to some kind of conclusion on the more severe charge.
Sure. I do think that's a possibility. It's unfortunate, but it's realistic. Think about it. Again, I mentioned jury fatigue. emotions are running high. You referenced earlier, Joel, that there was a juror crying, right?
Mhm.
And everyone's going to speculate, why is a juror crying? Does she feel guilty about, maybe having a guilty verdict, or is there guilt for the family? Or is she just stressed out, tired? This is emotional. Someone's maybe bullying her in there, or she feels that. There's so much pressure here. So yeah, I think, if a judge is going to tell them, if keep going back, there could be a compromise. But like I said before in the beginning, I wasn't surprised at all when the judge said that there's no unanimous verdict, because I still think this is a really hard case to get 12 people to agree on. So maybe at some point, yeah, there's going to be some type of compromise. That wouldn't surprise me either.
Joel,
Rob,
I think it's
go ahead, Daryl.
I think people need to understand it's not a mathematical formula that convicts or acquits someone. It's body language, it's the testimony, it's how the person or persons testify, it's the way the defendant sits in that courtroom. Think Amber Heard. It's the way he or she is looking. How did Karen look? Were the jurors sneaking glances at her as the testimony was there? This is what people have to understand. It's a story. And guilty beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt is not guilty beyond any doubt. And so it's a story that's unfolded. And those 12 men and women all have different histories. They all have different lives. All four of us could look at the same picture from the same angle and describe it in a very different way. Think of Fox versus CNBC versus MSNBC. They're all different.
Yeah,
So
well, Daryl, that's a great point. And part of the criticism that Karen Reed has gotten inside the courtroom is that she quote unquote smirks. What would your advice have been to her, just to stay stoic? I mean, you're a human. You're sitting there for 9 weeks. She literally got yelled at by the judge yesterday for laughing. But I mean, I was laughing actually. But so what? I mean, how would you have counseled her? What can you do to rein them in?
I tell my clients in a trial, if you, when you're nervous, smile, I don't care if you have to bite your lip and I see blood dripping down your chin, it's better than a smile, because we all interpret a smile in a different way. Oh my gosh, she's nervous. Oh my gosh, she thinks that this is just funny. How many times when I was an assistant DA, assistant state attorney, did I look at the defendant and mention to the jury, he thinks it's funny. It was always a he in those days. He thinks it's funny. Well, it doesn't mean he thinks it's funny, but that's the impression I wanted to give. I would say to her, you have to be stoic. I would make sure how she was dressed that looked like a little lamb, a gentle lamb.
By the way, Black Widow, clarifying that it's because I do like chocolate. I'm a chocolate addict, a Coca-Cola addict. Sky Lazaro has just lost all respect because she's like a yogi and a horseback rider living in like the perfect Utah air. But
you know what? I wish I lived this life. I'm now zen. I'm super healthy. I mean, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Joel. Can you just like manifest it so it's true?
I will. But Sky, this has come, by the way, my wife put this comment up, not me, for double clarification. And earlier, Mish, who's in Cape Town, South Africa, she's a makeup artist. We digress here on SCS. She wanted to know what kind of foundation you use. And then Julie Frew right now, who's from the UK, says, what bit does Sky use? I have no idea what that means. I'm assuming it is.
Of course.
What's bit?
It's like what goes in their mouth. Like this
right here.
Right here.
Yeah.
What?
My head's in the way. This is the bit.
For the
Like
horse.
goes in their mouth.
Oh,
For
I
the
had
horse?
no idea. I guess I'm living in a Daryl. I've become my father, Daryl. I have no idea what they're talking about. But
I've seen you on the commercial. I've seen you on that
Foundation
insurance
first.
commercial.
If they're listening, please send me some free stuff. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I use it's called Il Maquillage. I found it on Instagram. I love it. It's like complexion matching, but I mix it with the Charlotte Tilbury blur stuff, so it's not as heavy. So there you go. The bit I use is the Myler D-Ring Level 3.
By the way, this reminds me of another story that I'm going to digress about. When I was a reporter, I want to say at Fox 5. Yeah, I was at Fox 5, and it was like 2010, and they're like, "You're going to a red carpet for YouTube celebrities," and I was like, "What is YouTube?" Like, I didn't even know what YouTube was, and it was some woman. So I think I want to say her name is Fan or Pham, Pham, and she was like a makeup influencer in 2010. She's got to be worth like $800 million right now. But anyway, I was making fun of her incessantly for being a quote unquote YouTube star because I thought, oh, I'm on Fox 5. Meanwhile, she's probably like, she probably owns the world right now. And I'm a complete idiot and had zero vision. And whoever she is, I'm sure she's still around and I'm sure she's got like, 500 million subs. So good on her. And I had no idea. I still have no idea what I'm doing here. But nevertheless, I am here. Daryl Cohen, one of the questions I keep asking everyone is, did the defense bite off more than they can chew? In other words, they opened opening statements with Karen Reed was framed. And then in closings, literally Alan Jackson named everybody as being part of this cover up. And I liken it to like the Charlie Adelson testimony where there was an answer for everything. It was like this perfect cover up where every single piece fit together. And it was hard for me to wrap my mind around it. And I'm wondering what you think of this and if the jury could be struggling with the cover up and maybe he should have like drilled down more on the reasonable doubt, which there's boatloads of.
Well, to start with, it depends on what bit he used. Sorry for the play on words. I had to do that. But all of us have a different style. I believe throwing out a little bit and less is more. That the more you give, the more people have a chance to look at it. I like to give less and let them talk about it. Not my style for what he did, but I also like to appear a little bit disheveled, a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, jury, help me. I don't say it that way, but that's what I want them to be. I want them on my side. I want to be on the same team. I think he did too much, but it's the old story. If there's a not guilty, he was fabulous. If there's a guilty, he was terrible. That's the way it is.
Right.
Now you know the rest of the story.
There you go. Off topic. This is her. YouTube star Michelle Phan's makeup delivery startup just raised, what I tell you, $100 million to battle Birchbox.
I'm in the
This
wrong
was her. Yeah, let me tell you something. I went to this thing. I was forced to cover it. I'm like, I'm this loser reporter in New York. Now I got to cover some woman named Michelle Phan, who at the time I think was like 17. And I'm like, I don't even know what YouTube is. Anyway, you know the rest of the story, as Daryl just said. It's kind of crazy. Sky, to you, because you're like, you're so skilled in this area as well. And it's easy to Monday morning or Friday afternoon quarterback, but was it a mistake? Is it a fatal error? Do you think Alan Jackson is questioning himself, saying, why did I go so deep into this cover up instead of just really going after the investigation, which is an absolute disaster? It's an unmitigated disaster, but he created this whole, other scenario. Dave Aronberg basically said he burden shifted and put the burden on the defense instead of the Commonwealth. And I'm wondering what you think of that, if he is now regretting any of this.
I like a level of it. Me personally, I probably wouldn't have gone as far as he did. I think if you get too far into conspiracy theory land, you lose people. And I think especially, we've been hearing a lot about conspiracy theories in our country for the last few years, and people, it just rings a little hollow, I think, sometimes. And there was, just from, I wasn't doing the trial, I didn't know all the evidence, all those things, but just from what I saw, there was more than enough for him to beat on, to just talk about reasonable doubt, to talk about why the investigation was flawed, and maybe throw out some of these other alternative theories along with it. But I don't know that I would have completely hung my hat on an alternative theory and not argued the deficiencies a little bit harder. Like everybody has their own style, like we've discussed here. I always try to be the most reasonable person. If I can make the simplest, most reasonable argument or plausible explanation to a jury, I feel like more times than not that carries the day a lot better than trying to get the jury to buy into some absolute complete alternative theory.
By the
But
way,
again,
I didn't bring it up, but that last person said they bought my audio. I never bring it up. They do. They bought my audio book on Audible last night. It is available, and my mom, Carmen, and I are reading it, and it's a funny book, but it's also a book that could change your life. So check it out. And now the trolls will come out and say that I'm a grifter and that I'm exploiting my mother. Tara Ellis, Sky and Daryl, if they don't believe the cover up or that she hit him, isn't that reasonable doubt? Anyway, Daryl, what about that?
Well, certainly it can be reasonable doubt, but once again, they is a collective one. They 1 through 12 have to buy that. And that might be something that's discussed during jury deliberations. It may not, but certainly that can be enough. But is it enough? And where do you stop and where do you start? And is there a middle?
mhm.
That will make you think.
And the jury doesn't have to agree on why they think she did or didn't do it. I mean, some people can believe the conspiracy theory. Some people can believe just that she didn't hit him and that there wasn't enough evidence. They don't have to agree on however they come to the conclusion. They just have to agree on the ultimate fact or of whether or not or decision of whether or not she did or didn't do it. I think my point was, if you start going too far and you lose people, you lose some credibility. And if it's a close call as to whether or not they like your client, if it looks like you're throwing stuff out there that may or may not stick, I think that can be harmful.
I agree. Megan Sachs, I'm curious, you have students and you study this for a living, but this particular case, why do you think it has been so contentious, so divisive? I mean, we're covering cases all the time. I mean, there's a case going on every day in this country, but for some reason, this one popped out among the rest. Only, I think, really to be compared to maybe O.J. Simpson and how divisive it is. But why do you think that is so?
I think I said it on a previous show of yours, but this is David versus Goliath, right? And it's at a time where people are frustrated with policing, bad relations, unfortunately, at this current time. And I don't mean with all police and all citizens, but there's a fundamental, I'd say, not the most, but fundamental, I would say, mistrust of police kind of at this time. And people can identify with a person like Karen Reed. This is an ordinary person. If it could happen to her, it could happen to any of us. But then you throw in, the fact that your victim is a police officer. You also have the police officer, the cop who's investigating this is being compared to Mark Furman. So of course this is going to be reminiscent of OJ. So you have all of these components and you have a true adversarial trial. And this is one of the things I do teach my students about, the myth of the adversarial trial and that every defense attorney and prosecutor gets in a courtroom. First of all, the myth of a trial, because only a couple, few percent of cases actually go to trial. And then if they do, that there's always this awful relationship and it's contentious, but this is playing out like one of those trials. So it's one of what we call the celebrated cases. And so everybody is super interested.
I'll take that. And I agree with you. Leo Wren here. This is a good question. Daryl Cohen, I'm going to toss this to you. In light of the fact that there are demonstrators on both sides and it's been vicious in the court of public opinion, do you think we need to have stronger controls about these outside campaigns outside the courthouse? There's a buffer zone, but it's really nothing, Daryl. I mean, it's maybe 100 feet. There's people out there. There's no way the jurors are not seeing this. There's no way that they're not potentially feeling intimidated by this. They knew it'd be a problem. I was up there myself. I looked at it with my own eyes. I mean, the buffer zone is literally, it just cordons off like in the front lawn of the courthouse. But people are right there. Is that a problem?
I think they needed a buffet zone. And if Jimmy were still alive and playing, the buffer zone would be far, far away. I would have moved stanchions much further away from each other and from the courthouse so that the feeling of claustrophobicness goes away. Absolutely. We can't stop people from protesting, and we shouldn't. But what we can do is make it a nicer protest, a more gentle, a nicer, more human protest, more humane protest, a better protest. And by the way, people like Turtle Boy have also exacerbated this, and they've played it to the hill.
Daryl's making sure my Twitter comes in hot tonight with everyone yelling. Go ahead, keep going, Daryl. I love it.
Enough said. I usually believe less is more.
I was told to jump off a ledge. Ironically, I was thinking about if I jumped off the roof of my house, I'd be fine because it's not that high and there's very soft grass. So,
Joel, question: is there snow? Is there 3 or 4 foot of snow directly behind, so that if you fall off, you wouldn't see you or any of your jewelry?
I get where you're getting at, Daryl, but no, I'm in Miami, so no snow, but I could fall on it. I just got out of my car when I came in here.
Into the pool.
Yeah, an iguana scared the crap out of me. I screamed like a little girl in the parking lot of the studio. Tara Ellis brings up a point that Daryl was just talking about, and Sky, I'd love to get your take on this one. She says they shouldn't convict her just because they don't like her, right? Followed by, what if it's not reasonable doubt? What if it's a matter of which side they believe? I mean, Daryl was just saying, look, it's a whole show. It's a whole story. There's a whole 3-dimensional aspect to the courtroom. And the defendant, if we're being honest, can either irritate or endear jurors. How much of it is that versus what they're directed to do, which is really following the evidence?
I think it all plays into it. I think how she comes across, her demeanor in a courtroom, how they interpret her facial expressions, her mannerisms, all of those things it becomes very important, especially in a case where she doesn't. I mean, most defendants don't testify, right? Because they're not going to help themselves. I'm assuming she probably would not have. But when all they have to judge is staring at someone all day and their reaction to things, they in their mind decide who this person is. And when you take that and then you play, recordings or whatever else that the state played, no, jurors shouldn't convict people just because they don't like them. But I think not liking them plays into this next question of who they believe more. It plays into credibility, and the jurors are instructed on credibility of witnesses. And the jury instruction, at least federally and here in Utah, I'm assuming it's similar out there, essentially says you can believe all of something a witness says, you can believe none of it, you can believe some of the things they say and not other things that they say, that a law enforcement officer's testimony shouldn't be given any more weight than any other lay person's testimony. And so when jurors are looking at evidence, I don't think it's as black and white as we kind of want to believe that, either it did or didn't happen, or you have a battle of the experts or whatever. I mean, these jurors can sit and parse out parts of people's testimony and say, I believe that, but I don't believe that part. Or, I think that's probably right, but I think they went too far there. So when you kind of look at this all in a bigger picture, which is, I think, what people do and jurors do, whether or not they like her tends to probably help the credibility of her witnesses or lack thereof.
Very well put. A few more minutes because I'm going to collapse if I keep going. And
I have to leave because I have to go present at a paralegal conference.
Sky, thank you. You're still working. It's early there. So thank you, Sky. Thank you so much for being here. We love having you.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
And I love your horse's bit.
Thank you. I know. It's the best part of it.
And your foundation. See you next time, Sky.
Yes.
Thank you.
Studio Fix by Mac.
She's awesome. Megan, this is for you. 5 more minutes, I promise. Then we're going to wrap it up.
Okay.
Then I'm going to go home and my kids are going to be like, what are we doing, Dad? And I'm going to say, we're doing it. We're staring at the walls. Kids, tonight, we're going to stare at the walls. That's what we're going to do. Megan, may I please ask you what the likelihood you're the non-attorney on the panel, but they're asking you, is of the Commonwealth reaching out to the defense. This is good. And offering to end this with the second lesser charge. Should Karen take that plea? I've heard that she's never going to take a plea, but do you think some sort of deal will be made?
So funny. I wondered the same thing for like a hot second. And then I realized, no, she's not going to take that plea. And that's what I think. I would say Daryl probably is better equipped to answer this question, but I don't think Karen would take a plea like that. And I'm not sure at this point that the Commonwealth would also be making that offer.
Daryl, you think there's any plea coming down the pike? As Angelo Dundee used that phrase, coming down the pike. I love the old-timers.
Ali. Oh, is it Cassius Clay? I can't remember. So if I were representing Karen Reed, I wouldn't wait for the prosecution to come to me. I would go to them and say, we'd be willing to take a misdemeanor plea in exchange for prohibition. Did I say probation?
It's like prohibition.
No, prohibition of losing my freedom. I would absolutely go to them and I would strongly recommend it. Why? Because right now they don't know what's going to happen. What we do know is at least one person is voting for a conviction and at least one person is voting for an acquittal. We don't know. And when you don't know what you don't, you have to admit what you don't know, take the guarantee if the prosecution would do it. And again, as a defense lawyer, I would go to them. I don't think they would come to us. But if they did, I'd still take it. It wouldn't matter.
But do you think that's going to happen, Daryl?
It's a definite maybe.
Is that a question?
Thank you for the follow-up.
Definite maybe.
Oh, okay.
A definite maybe. From Jury Duty RN to you, one of the issues, Megan, if we're being honest, is that sometimes wealthy people get a better defense, and oftentimes poor people get a worse defense. They get the public defender. Karen Reed comes from a lot of money. Her family is well off. But the question here is, how will Karen Reed afford her team if this is a hung jury and they take her to trial again? Does it get more difficult for her from a financial standpoint?
Well, yeah, I mean, it gets more expensive, of course. So yes, she is a defendant who seems very lucky in that she's one of few who has means. And I think she has, people who are raising money for her. So she has public support. So I think it's easier for her than an average defendant. But yeah, it gets more expensive. This is going to be super costly to go through this all over again. But she has a lot of financial support. She has means. So don't forget that she's luckier than most defendants are. 85% of defendants in state court are indigent, meaning that they must rely on a public defender. And the other 15%, even if they have means, are not going to have means for two very public, drawn out trials with the sheer number of experts and just, the costliness of this. So yeah, it's going to be costly, but I think Karen Reed, I think she has a lot of financial support.
Look who popped up. Natalie, the lawyer chick from YouTube. Natalie, we were just going to wrap up, but since you showed up, we'll go a few more minutes, and I appreciate you hopping on. I know Steve Cohen reached out to you. Steve's doing amazing work behind the scenes, as is Space Coast, the COE, the mods, Jury Duty RN, saying hello to her favorite YouTuber, who is not me. What is her name again? Michelle. Who's the makeup person? I bet you Natalie knows her. Do you know? Oh, you're muted. Natalie, are you muted? You're not muted, but we're not hearing you.
Oh no.
Oh,
how about now? How about now?
Yes, yeah.
I forgot to turn on the focus right. Sorry.
I was telling everyone in 2010 when I was working at Fox 5 in New York, I had to go cover quote unquote YouTube celebrities. I thought it was the dumbest thing I ever heard of. I'm like, these people are idiots for doing something on YouTube. Never even heard of YouTube, I don't think, at the time. And what was her name? COE something Pham.
Michelle Phan.
Yeah, her.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's now in some kind of $100 million deal for a makeup company. So I guess I was the idiot. And you guys are more cutting edge than me. Thank you for bringing Natalie on. Chicklets. Daddy Short Nuts. This is a name his son gave him, not himself.
Okay.
I want to clarify that his young son gave him that name. I wish my son called me Daddy Short Nuts. Natalie, crazy day today, and we're losing it, as you can tell. But 12:30-ish, jury comes out, says we're deadlocked. We need more time. Then we get word 3:45. They come out. They say we need till 4:15. So everyone jumped to the conclusion, wow, they must have reached a verdict, because they said a specific time of 4:15. 4:15, we hear come back Monday. It was kind of a letdown, I think, for everyone involved, because everyone's still hanging. What do you make of all this? What do you think's going on in that jury room?
Well, it sounds to me like after weeks and weeks of receiving evidence, the jury is taking their role very seriously. And it sounds like they were trying to look at as much of the evidence as possible. So I know that that just necessarily is going to take a lot of time. But what this does tell me is that the Commonwealth should be concerned, because there's debate, there's doubt, there's holdouts. There's somebody or some bodies in there that are not in accord. And so if I was the Commonwealth, I would be more concerned with that. That doesn't mean that juries can't sit there, debate, go back and forth, say that they're deadlocked, get the Massachusetts equivalent of the Allen instruction, and then turn around and say, you know what, we're all saying guilty, or we're all saying not guilty. But a mistrial, I think, would not be to the benefit of the Commonwealth here. Because once they have to retry this case, a lot of their witnesses had a lot of impeachment come up. So now there's like 3 or 4 different prior statements that a lot of these witnesses have made, sometimes under oath, that now we've all seen that if they try and testify differently later, it's going to be a problem for them. On the other hand, for the defense, I'm sure they wouldn't be happy with a mistrial totally, because their entire defense is out there now, and the Commonwealth will have time to kind of correct for the issues that the defense raised. They can't do anything about the poor investigation, but they might be able to do something about, witness statements and clean things up. So I know everyone's probably on tenterhooks at this moment, but you just don't know what's happening with the jury. You really do not. Jury deliberations are something I wish I could get in the room, but after you've said your closing argument, I know each sides are sitting there biting their nails, wondering what's going to happen. But I don't think this is great for the Commonwealth.
I am glad that Natalie's here, because she can talk, and I am losing steam. STS, come save me and throw in some questions here. I'll toss them to the guests for the remaining few minutes. But this is a stinging comment. The jury is dedicating more time to this case than Massachusetts State Police did. McSpunky had a funny answer to Daddy Short Nuts. I'm not going to read it because I'll get yelled at, but it was funny. It made me laugh. Jose B here. Could the jury feel that Karen Reed dropped off John O'Keefe into the lion's den based on her texting and actions with what's going on here? Plus her lack of emotion. I can't see that. My eyes are going on me. If you understand this question, Natalie, please take it, because I don't fully understand it.
Right. I don't fully understand it either. I'll put it, I don't fully understand it, but I will say this. The jury, because of the poor investigation, it might be doing a bit of fact finding of their own, right? So you don't ever want to, as a prosecuting body, go into it with the jurors being like, all right, well, let's figure out what happened here so we can figure out if this person's really guilty or not, because they should at least have that in their mind. Like, this is the timeline of events. This is what actually happened. So I'm sure a lot of the deliberations have been spent trying to reconstruct a timeline that was very poorly laid out by the Commonwealth's case.
Natalie, while you're on a roll here, how many times can a judge send them back to the jury room? How long can this go on?
So they've already gotten the equivalent of the Allen charge. My understanding is that that's it. Like, if they come back and they're like, we're deadlocked again, that's a mistrial.
Hold on. I didn't realize that. So this last time this afternoon, was that the Allen charge?
Did they not get it? Well, that's not called Allen. They did not get the charge. Okay.
No. Yeah, there was no Allen charge, I don't think.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. I thought I saw someone say they got the equivalent of it.
Once the Allen charge is given, which it might be, then what?
Then the Allen charge is given, they're sent back to deliberate further. And then if they say we're still hopelessly deadlocked, it's a mistrial. That's been my experience.
That's not true.
Okay, go ahead. Correct me.
It can't. No, I'm giving you an addition. It can be a mistrial, but the judge could once again say you need to go back there and deliberate, because some jury is going to come with a verdict, and we just don't want to do that. That doesn't have to be a mistrial.
Okay.
But it's all time.
Sure.
Can I share something with you guys?
Please.
You talk about juries. I was a young prosecutor in Fulton County, Atlanta, in the DA's office, tried a very complicated fraud case. I was so proud of myself because we got a conviction. And months went by. I went to a sports situation. The guy taking tickets says, "Hey, Daryl, how are you?" And he said, "You did a great job on that case." And I looked at him with that dumb look that I had and still do. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "That fraud case." And I'm thinking, He said, "I was on the jury. And when the other lawyers asked if we were friends or related to any of the lawyers or any of the participants, I knew you, but we weren't friends." So, okay. So I say to him, "So tell me what happened." He said, "Well, we were really, really confused. We didn't know what to do. But I told him you were a good guy. And if you said he was guilty, he was guilty." And so the jury found him guilty. And I don't think that is one in a lifetime. I think that happens more often than we would believe.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
very interesting.
Sad, but true.
Yes,
Very.
sad but true. And Daryl, on this point here, could the jury let the judge know what they have if they're still kind of at this impasse? Is there a time where the judge will ask them privately, well, how many holdouts are there?
I don't know.
No,
I would think not.
I don't think that would be allowed. I think that would be interfering in their deliberations. So if they have a question that they have, of course, and all the parties contribute to the answer, if there's going to even be an answer given, but not like the judge probing them of why they did or did not reach a certain decision. Yeah, I guess the reason I said what I said, I really want to preface that because I don't want to spread misinformation. That's important to me. Is that every time I have tried a case and in my state, anytime an Allen charge has been given, and then the jury comes back and says that they're deadlocked, hopelessly deadlocked, a mistrial has been declared. I have never seen but that's Maryland. This is Massachusetts. So it's not even called the Allen charge. They have a different instruction. It has different wording to it and everything. So I don't know what the Commonwealth necessarily does. But I can just say that in my experience, whenever the Allen charge is given, and the timing of the Allen charge is usually an issue. They don't like to give it very early. They like to send them back, deliberate. But if they come back multiple times saying that they're deadlocked, then they get the Allen charge, and then they come back and say they're deadlocked again. A mistrial has always been declared. I've never seen it not declared.
Megan, we're getting back to you in a second, and we're going to wrap shortly. But to Daryl, these are lawyer questions. That's why I'm going to Daryl from Canton, Catherine, our dear friend in Maui. Daryl, have you, or I guess Natalie, have you ever had a pressured juror change their mind when the jury is polled? If so, what happens? In other words, trial's over, you poll the jurors, and they said, "I changed my mind because I felt too much pressure." Have you ever had that happen, Daryl?
I have never had it happen. I have oftentimes, as a defense lawyer, wished it would happen, but I've never had it happen.
Natalie?
So for myself, in my 13 years of practice, no. And I understand for that not to be the norm, but I will say that happened with one of my coworkers last year, and it was legendary throughout the courthouse that one of the jurors was just like, "No, not guilty. And it had to be, I don't know if they sent them back to delivery or it was a mistrial. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but anyway, yes. And the judge was like, "Well, why did you say guilty?" And they said that, they felt like they had to, but that wasn't really their decision. So, but that is just, it's like lightning in a bottle. It was the talk of the courthouse for weeks. So it's really very rare.
From S. Ray to Megan, and then we'll get final thoughts here. Joel, what about the optics of the jury? I mean, this is interesting because this is a very old courthouse, very small. You always hear the judge telling the witnesses to speak up over the fans and the AC. But Joel, what about the optics? But Megan, really for you, of the jury sitting straight across from Karen and then behind her, John O'Keefe's weeping mother. I mean, it's like they could touch each other. They're so close.
Oh, I know. I thought the same thing, actually. The optics are uncomfortable. I don't know how you would say that because that's exactly what came to my mind. I don't think that's a good look at all for various reasons, and uncomfortable is the best word I could come up with. And yeah, it is interesting the way you discuss the courtroom and the fans and the noise and speaking up, because all of those factors also impact what jurors are going to think if they can't hear someone, if someone's yelling, if they're rolling their eyes because of this. I mean, all of these small factors that you would never think are going to play into a juror's mind are definitely going to. I also want to add one thing, Joel, that was interesting. While I'm not a lawyer and I'm a criminologist, I have covered some cases on my podcast, Direct Appeal, that were, in following convictions and questioning whether or not they were wrongful convictions. And in one case, we interviewed a juror who talked about jury deliberations and how completely shocked at some of the ridiculous things that went on in that room were. And one of the things she said during this murder trial was that this woman came in and was completely convinced that the defendant had in fact perpetrated the crime, had murdered the woman involved in this case, and because she had a dream about it, and in the dream he had karate chopped her, and she was totally convinced that's how it happened, and now wanted to vote guilty. So
That's crazy.
when you talk about some of these things that happen, or Daryl had said it,
Wow.
something like crazy like that, or, just saying Daryl's a nice guy. And if he says it, people come in with this idea. I think it happens more often than not as well.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. One day I'll share the story. I can't do it now. It's too long, but I had a dream about Shaquille O'Neal, and then I bumped into him the next day. Very similar thing. Needless to say, he thought I was the craziest person alive. I'll tell you the whole story one day. That's like one of 3 times I bumped into Shaquille O'Neal and actually hung out with him. He's a very cool dude. Pretty big too. JC here. Lawyers, this is a much bigger question, and I promise we're wrapping. Daryl, would AJ, Alan Jackson, Action Jackson, Ajax, would he have been more prudent to explain the whole "I hit him" statement versus the question, "Did I hit him?" and also tell the jury they don't have to believe their exact version of events to vote not guilty? What about this, Daryl? And then I have a follow-up.
It sort of goes back to what I said before. If there's a not guilty, Alan Jackson is not going to be the country singer. He's going to be the most famous, terrific defense lawyer ever. If he loses, if there's a guilty, then he made a big mistake. Again, all we do as lawyers is we're trying a case, we're setting the stage, we're part of a story. And if we tell it correctly, in our opinion, and we lose, then we have to think about it again. In this case, if he wins, he did the right thing. If he didn't, no. I'm not going to second guess him yet, but I may later.
And Daryl, that leads directly into my next question, which I will ask Natalie as well. He's the celebrity attorney here, LA, the tailored suits, the coiffed hair, the cufflinks. And now he's looking nervous, if we're being honest. I think everyone is feeling that way right now. What's going on in his mind? What goes on in a criminal defense attorney's mind the longer this drags out, as it is right now?
Oh, it's the worst feeling. It really is. And I'll say this, a quick verdict, statistically speaking, the wisdom is that that's a guilty, right? But I recently had a quick not guilty, which was pretty nice. But I walked into that courtroom after they said they had a verdict after about 30 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, how could they come back so fast? So, but anyway, the conventional wisdom is that, a longer, a quicker verdict is more beneficial to the prosecution. However, that's just conventional wisdom. That doesn't mean that's how it actually plays out. And so right now, I can just imagine that there's just that feeling of butterflies in your stomach, anxiousness. It's just a terrible feeling. It's like waiting for your bar results to come back. It's just so unsettling. You have no idea what's going to happen. And it's so important to your client and to you and to your reputation. And so I can only imagine that they're not feeling great right now. Hey, Miss Mandy.
Yeah. And by the way, if you hate the show, please subscribe. If you love it, please subscribe. If you're on the fence, please subscribe. Daryl Cohen, it's my new line. If you hate it, subscribe. Just to that point, Alan Jackson could have been on his plane, not his plane. Maybe he has a plane. I don't know. But he could have been on a plane flying back to LA, his home. Instead, he's in town and Beantown this weekend. There's obviously worse places to be. He's going to watch the local news. He's going to see this all going on. Is he going to sit here and what if himself, basically nonstop all weekend? What if I did this? What if I did that? What if I did? I mean, is there any way around that? You think he's beating himself up a little bit right now?
I think if he were a baby lawyer, this is his first trial or two, maybe more so. But all of us, when we finish, say, I should have done this, or I shouldn't have done that, or I'm glad I did what I did. I revert back to what I said before. If he wins, he was the greatest. If he doesn't win, he was the worst. Now, I will tell you, he dresses in a very different way. When I'm in front of a jury, depending on where I am, I dress for the jury. I don't dress for myself. Never wear cufflinks, never want to show that I'm cooler than the rest of you. I want to be part of the group. So if I'm in a small town, I tend to have more of a Southern accent. If I'm in a large city, the accent disappears. If I'm with wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, I try to make what I do mesh in and become part of the other people. So I don't know. I think he's probably going to say, should I have done that or shouldn't I have done that? Or we did the best we could with what we had. And
I kind of want to contribute a bit to this discussion about the choosing to go whole hog on this is a widespread conspiracy. Someone else killed Mr. O'Keefe, Officer O'Keefe, and they're framing Karen Reed because of either incompetence or because of allegiance to the actual killer. That is the defense that they chose. It is not usually advisable with juries to do two different defenses. Now, of course, you want to touch on reasonable doubt in your closing argument and remind them that, it's not your burden to prove the case. It's the state's burden to prove it. And, you want to make those little reminders, but you don't want to bifurcate your defense, because a reasonable doubt defense is an actual defense where you will say, like, look at all these pieces of evidence that are missing. You just don't know what happened. And you don't normally or always have an alternative theory for what happened. You're just saying we don't really know what happened here. And the police and the state didn't do what they needed to do in order for us to know what happened. And you got a lot of that in the questioning. But in the closing, Mr. Jackson went in on the theory of the case. And that is normal practice for a trial attorney to pick one route of defense. And so some people are kind of saying, like, shouldn't he touch on other things more? Yes, maybe. But you also don't want to confuse the jury with backing away from the defense that you have gone so hard on, especially with such a strong opening, which is not an opening I would normally make in most cases. But he really kind of gave the whole thing away and said, this is where we're going with it. And he closed it all up in the closing by hearkening back to that opening where his first line, or Mr. Yannetti's maybe his first line was, Karen Reed was framed. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say Karen Reed was framed. But even if you don't believe that, we have not met these technical points and this technical point and that technical point, it might sound a bit like you don't fully believe your defense. So he picked a defense, whether or not it was right or wrong. It is the normal practice to go hard on the defense that you picked. And he certainly did that. So whatever the outcome is, they never pulled any punches. They never backed away from what they were doing. It was controversial. People don't agree. But if I was in trouble, that's the type of advocacy that I would want.
I got to thank Alistair Crowley. I was getting nervous. No one had yelled at me in at least an hour. Not my mother, not the COE, not people on Twitter at #X. But Alistair Crowley, Joel spends 98% of his time ripping Jax. I just said the guy was well dressed and had cufflinks. Someone even asked if I'm jealous. Yes, I am. Joel almost never discusses Lally. I brought up Lally 1,000 times today. You heap criticism on the defense, but barely discuss Lally and Proctor, etc. I'm sorry. I will have all of Monday to discuss that, and I promise to do it. One final question here, and then very quick final thoughts. Can the lawyers on the panel, Daryl, explain, sorry, Megan, why the jury is not allowed to have the trial transcript?
I think every court, every jurisdiction handles it in a very different way. Sometimes a judge, whoever he or she may be, may say, I don't want them to have a transcript. I will read back a portion of the testimony. Other judges feel differently. I think it's, for the most part, up to the various jurisdictions as to how a judge handles it. And one thing, sometimes a judge doesn't want you to have that transcript because oh my gosh, the more you see, the more complicated it gets and the
Mhm.
more questions you have. So let's keep it simple, stupid. Let's go to the KISS method or short.
Yeah.
Natalie, the lawyer chick, she came on late in the show, but we appreciate her being here. Same story for Sky Lazaro, who's a very accomplished criminal defense attorney out of Utah. Richard Gabriel, one of the best jury consultants. Natalie from Mary Swampa. We'll take some questions as we say goodbye. Alan Jackson has an amazing 96% success rate. I think he did his very best. Do you happen to know, just on average, roughly what the success rate is of a defense attorney, Natalie? And your final thoughts as we start to wrap it up.
So what did you say about the success
Do
rate?
you happen to know what the average
No.
success rate is for a criminal defense attorney?
No, I don't.
It's
I
much
have
less than 96%.
probably much less than 90. I mean, like I'll say this. So I'm a public defender, right? So we're not picking like choice cases to take to trial. So we're taking the case to trial based on what the client wants to do and how the circumstances kind of shake out. So if you're like a trial dog attorney who tries the majority of your cases, keeping track is impossible. It's impossible for me. I'm in trial like every other week and then a homicide trial 10 times a year or something like that. So 96% would be amazing. But final thoughts is, let me just say this one little off the cuff thing. Joel, what she said about Alan Jackson, I thought was perfectly fine. Mr. Yannetti, unfortunately, is not as fun. He's not as fun to talk about. It's not any hate on Mr. Jackson. He's just more of a character. He's more enjoyable to comment on. He has more of a boisterous courtroom presentation. So I would like that to be my final thoughts.
Thank you. Megan Sachs, I feel bad. The COE is going to yell at me, say you didn't let Megan talk enough. It is not a personal thing. A lot of these were legal questions. Megan knows that. She's from Jersey. I love this girl. Woman. Jersey girl. That's why I say. I'm going to.
All right.
Where's Billy Joel when you need him?
Billy Joel, that's Long Island. You're talking.
Oh, I was going to say that's actually Long Island, which is where I'm originally
from. My uptown girl.
What part of Long Island are you from?
I'm from Long Island. I'm from Massapequa.
Yeah.
I used to live in Hempstead. Okay.
I'm always like neighbors. See?
Megan is not
Massapequa was right there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, not far from the Long Island serial killer.
That's right. I grew up in the neighborhood.
Wow. Megan, I'm going to leave it just a very open-ended. What do you think happens on Monday with this trial? Do you think that we get to some sort of conclusion, or is everyone going to go home unhappy and unfulfilled once this jury is finished doing what they're doing?
Yeah, both actually is what I think is going to happen.
Really?
I think there's going to be a conclusion and a lot of people are going to be unfulfilled, unhappy. One of the things that I always notice is that there are going to be a lot of judgments about the criminal justice system, the legal system, based entirely on this trial because it's so public. It's a trial. The nation sees it. I distinctly remember on other major trials, people calling me like Casey Anthony and saying, how could this happen? Your criminal justice system, because I work in the field, somehow I own this system. So there will be a lot of anger. I would caution people to remember that, first of all, the jury has a really tough job and they should not be making decisions unless they are, really feel really certain and don't have much reasonable doubt, right? That's supposed to be the standard here, so that they're left with no doubt. So just remember that the jury has a really hard job and that we may feel a certain way based on the evidence out here, but we're not privy to all of that inside the courtroom. It's a different task that they have. So, cut them a little bit of slack, give them a break because they've worked hard, but also remember that the entire criminal justice system should not be judged on this one case because trial cases like this represent the very smallest percentage of all cases in the system, and most are not disposed of this way. So this is not the typical order of things. So try not to judge an entire system based on the outcome of one sensational case.
I don't know why I'm even showing this, but I have this on my desk. I have a few of these here because that's how I feel most days.
I like that.
And I just ordered a couple more things for my little studio here, but this might be my favorite. What do you call these? Like a prayer candle? This is it's Keith Morrison.
I know.
I don't know what you call these.
Keith Morrison the saint on the
yes,
candle?
Yes. Yeah. What is this
that's
called? I'm a
nice.
Jewish guy. I don't know what you call these.
Mr. Mojo Rising.
Yeah, Keith Morrison is the saint. I don't
know. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know what they call those candles.
Sorry, can't help you either.
Yeah, and Daryl, we're out of luck. Anyone knows what?
It's called Pray for a Verdict candle.
Last but not least, his name is Daryl Cohen. He's I was going to say a father figure to me, maybe an older brother figure to me. But anyway, he's a great
Yeah,
guy.
really. Come
I like
on.
that. Older brother.
Super,
is better.
super sweet guy and smart as hell. Daryl, your final thoughts on, are we going to get some sort of legitimate verdict here? And I guess a hung jury is a legitimate verdict, or is it going to be hung? Are we going to be left out to dry?
I am betting on a CV, a compromise verdict.
Oh, you are. And so
But
you think
only if they can't reach a verdict early on, and the judge said, ladies and gentlemen, July 4th is around the corner. Do you really want to spend the time at the courthouse?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And pizza doesn't get it for July 4th. It's got to be barbecue.
Daryl, final question here from Ned Smith. She is saying Keith Morrison should be running for president after last night's debate. I think it's probably an amazing. By the way, he's Canadian, so we'd have to, I guess, we'd have to amend the law. But Daryl, would you be his vice president?
I would consider it strongly.
Wow, what a
Wonderful.
compliment.
And we're being told by multiple people it is called a votive candle.
Thank you.
Had no idea. Someone else said votive. Never heard of that, but I will take your word for it. You learn something new every day. Amazing group of people. I always say best guess, which is not just a tagline. It is our reality, but we've got a better community. That's why you see it up over this shoulder. I could never be a weather person. We're back Monday. It is Friday. We're back Monday following this verdict all day long with all brand new shows. I've got to recharge. Have a great weekend. Love you, America. Love you, Maryland, if that's where Natalie is. Love you, New York, New Jersey, where Megan is. Daryl's in Atlanta, of course. Canton, Mass. Dedham, Massachusetts, where the Norfolk County Courthouse is. And let's think of Officer John O'Keefe. Till next time.